Good morning, traders. I'm Dennis Dick, and welcome to Premarket Info. Joel's away today, but we've got Jake LeCure from the Benzinga News team's going to help me out with the show here today. Jake, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, man. How about you?
Well, not too bad. We're getting a little market rally here again. Seems like we always end up getting a market rally somehow, despite a little sell-off yesterday. Later in the day, we are getting a little bounce here this morning, up to 1654.25 on the highs. The overnight low has been 1648.25. So we are just right now near the highs of the day. Something to remember today: it is the third Friday of the month. It is option expiration. These opens sometimes tend to be skewed a little bit high. So at 9:30. Often you have institutional traders that are trying to jockey their positions, jockey their option positions, and sometimes that can put some upwards pressures on the stocks off the hop. So keep that in mind if you're trading today. We could see a little bit of a stronger open. We have had quite a bit of news here overnight. Jake, let's start off with J.C. Penney.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have JCPenney after the close yesterday, and had drastically lowered estimates. They were expected to pull in a loss of 86 cents a share on the bottom line and 2.7 billion on the top. And man, they missed by a mile. They reported a loss of $1.31 per share on the bottom line. Revenues coming in thin on the top line as well, 2.63 billion. I mean, that was just a miserable report. It was just real rough for JCPenney there.
And interesting enough, right off of that report, I was watching the after hours action. The stock traded down to 18.16 right off the hop. So what you would think, the stock sells off just off the hop. But then all of a sudden, it started to find buyers. And believe it or not, this stock actually turned around and traded positive. I was tweeting out at that point in time. I was like, here they'd miss on the top line, they miss on the bottom line, and the stock's still trying to rally here. It got up over 1950, believe it or not, after hours. So it was up 80 cents on this basically disaster of a report. Then everybody got their brains together, I guess, and said, what is going on here? And they actually did start selling it off. It is now trading down here back to where it was just after the report at 1815. So it looks like that 1815, 1816 number is going to be a critical number here in the pre-market. The after hours low, or the pre-market low, has been 1781. So I would keep those two numbers in mind if I'm trading JC Penny here today. If you're looking just from a technical perspective, this is a stock obviously that is broken out from the whole 16-17 area that we had talked about for quite some time. Broke out 4 trading sessions ago, trading above the 18 area, got up over 19, pulling back. Now, I think you get in these low 17s. I think you might find some buyers here, because I think there's a few people who could have been caught short here as well. So I don't know if this is going to be, even though a disaster report, I don't see JCPenney just turning around and falling 10% today, just because the technicals look kind of good coming into it. So I think you might find actually some buyers. I don't think it'll go positive today, but man, you never know in this market. It's kind of funny.
No kidding. No kidding. I'm really surprised that you didn't get more of a drop there. I know you were commenting that right after the earnings came out that it actually jumped. I mean, those earnings were just abysmal. And I mean, what was the street expecting if that was what was considered good?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it was just
imagine if they would have beat
a 52% miss. Yeah, or even matched. If they would have matched expectations, it'd probably be at $20 now.
Yeah, and that's the
incredible.
funny thing, and that's all about market sentiment. And once these stocks, and we've been talking about this on the show for quite some time, it's all about momentum. And JCPenney has had some momentum going here for the last few weeks. It's been moving upwards. So, and it's a company that has been beat up. Obviously, this stock, if we go back to the weeklies and the monthlies, you can go back. This was an $85 stock back in '07. So when you put it all in perspective, obviously, nobody expects JCPenney to probably blow stuff away, but they're not even making money. When you're losing that kind of money, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be an investor in it, but from a trading perspective, it's still starting to look. It still looks okay here. It's kind of funny.
It sure moves on any news that's out there, so it is. It's got the volatility that traders love.
Yes, they do. We also had ARUN Networks there, Jake. How'd they do?
Oh wow! So they had already guided lower earlier in the quarter, which dropped them, and they lowered their guidance, and the third quarter EPS came in at 11 cents. They had already guided lower, and their lower guidance was 15 cents. It was looking bad. We can pull up the exact stuff there, but they missed their even lower guidance. Things just looked terrible for ARUN Networks. They're down 20% this morning, and 8 analysts have downgraded them.
Eight
Now, this is after the fact.
eight
You get a lot
analysts are
of.
downgrading. Now you know how those analysts go. They always come and then they
Uh,
jump on the band. Oh, well, we won't downgrade the stock when it's 18. We'll downgrade it when it's at 13 here. Who are the
oh, yeah.
analysts? Who are the analysts at 8?
So, and you've got actually some decent names here. So kind of shame on J.P. Morgan here for not picking this up and being a follower. But you also had Janney, Needham, Stevens, Wedbush, Oppenheimer, FBN. Just a bunch of analysts following the stock in. In this case, it's just I don't know.
Buy high,
You're,
sell
you're not
low.
getting much. Yeah, right. Hindsight Capital is just killing it again.
1337 is where this is now, and this is your stock that's down the most here. I've got them all in front of me. ARUN down now 23.6%. Stock that's down second most is Donaldson, which actually reported earnings too, and it's only down 5%. So ARUN is really trading down here significantly
Well,
here
yeah.
this morning.
It's
Wow.
also important to note that the company guided lower for the fourth quarter. It was expected to do 16 cents. That's what the street was thinking for the fourth quarter. It guided 10 to 12 cents. And the revenue estimates for the fourth quarter 153 million. But it guided in a range of 148 to 150 million. So that's dragging it down as well. Not only did it miss its lowered guidance, but it lowered its guidance for the next quarter below street estimates even further. So
Not good. We do have a level here that I found going back to June and July of last year. Aruba Networks had a triple bottom right down here. 1236 was a low on the 8th of June. We had a low on the 13th of January or of July of 1240, and then 1237 the week after. So 1240, I would say that whole area is it should find some decent support down there in the mid 12s, and that low 1240 area. We're at 1340 right now, so I think if you're buying here, I think it might be a little early. I think it starts getting the 12 handle though. I think it will find some support. You'd hope, anyways, for Aruba Network's sake here.
yeah, for sure, they really need it.
We've got Tesla actually announced the price of their secondary. This is obviously
Yep.
the craziest stock in the whole world. We know we've
Oh
been
my
joking
gosh.
about the trading ranges that went from the trading ranges went from a couple of points to 8-point days to 12-point days to 18-point days the other day. The trading ranges are just absolutely insane. They did price the secondary here.
Yep.
What's the price on that one, Jake?
Well, actually, one of the key details there is actually increase the number of shares from 2.7 million to 3.39 million
Okay.
there, and they priced it at 92.24.
Okay.
And yet the market managed to decide that that's another reason for Tesla to rise. So they are dumping shares onto the market, and yet it's still going up. I don't know what Tesla can do wrong right now.
Yeah, and that's the sentiment once again. This is the thing that a lot of people were caught short the stock from a fundamental. Those guys that are shorting it on fundies, which just hasn't been working lately, are obviously underwater here. I do want to say these prices, these secondary prices, when they do price these, often do act like a floor for the stock. We just saw it in Triple D last week when they did the secondary and priced it at $40. Stock opened just above 40 and had been running basically for 3 or 4 days straight after that. I'm not saying Tesla's going to do the same thing here because this thing can trade everywhere. This is just basically almost like going to the casino sometimes when you're trading the stock. But it's a number to keep in mind, 92.24, because that is the price of the secondary, and that could act like a magnet, could act like a floor. We're trading about $2 above that right now, so I'd keep that in mind here if you're trading Tesla.
Yeah, absolutely.
JWN also reported earnings there. Nordstrom. Jake, what do you got on the JWN report?
Uh, EPS came in a little thin there. Analyst estimates had it set at 76 cents a share. They came in at 73, so not a huge miss, but there was a miss there. Revenues were expected to be 2.8 billion for the quarter. Came in at 2.79 or 75 billion, my mistake. So a little thin on the top and a little thin on the bottom, but not a colossal miss there.
So Nordstrom is trading down on very light volume here in the pre-market, kind of just choppy trade, only 560 shares here this morning. So it's best the bid's at 58.76, the best offers at 59.35. So it looks like it could open down a couple of bucks. Again, this chart, so many stocks have been on a run here, but if we do just look, we did find a couple lows. I'm going to point a couple out here. There was one on the 9th of 58.04. If you start to get below there, you have a low from a gap day at 57.38. So and then you also have, you got to be cognizant of this, we're trading there right about right now, but on the 13th we had a low of 59.03. So I'd be kind of almost looking at the whole numbers on this more than anything. So if it cuts through the 59 handle, I don't see much until you get to 58. If it cuts through the 58 handle, I don't see much until you start approaching that gap area, 57.38. So hard to tell where a stock is going to open when it's only traded 560 shares in the pre-market. We got a couple of key downgrades here too this morning. Deere, it looks like getting downgraded there, and this is a big one. Goldman Sachs, Jake. What was Goldman Sachs saying to downgrade Deere here this morning?
We can pull that up. The Goldman Sachs downgrades there really tend to carry a lot of weight. I personally haven't had a chance to
Yeah,
dig
we've
too
got.
far into the report.
They
But we
downgraded
do
to.
have
Is that right? They downgraded to sell. I'm looking at my notes here this
yeah,
morning.
downgrade it to a sell and lower the price target from $98 to $85. And Goldman Sachs is one of the few
Very
analyst shops
influential.
that consistently can throw companies around. I mean, is them and Deutsche Bank and maybe Oppenheimer and maybe sometimes Wells Fargo can carry that much weight. I mean, almost always when they change their rating, it moves the stock. So.
Yep. And you've got the market trading up 5.5 points here this morning, and Deere is trading down 70 cents. So it looks like they are going to be putting some pressure on Deere this morning. 88.56 was the low from 2 days ago. We're almost at that level right now. We've actually traded below it. We were down over, actually we're getting down to lower 88s there just a few minutes ago, so we are bouncing back a bit. If we go through there, you got to just be cognizant of this. This has been on a tear before a few days ago there, obviously. Before they had the gap down day, you were on a tear where the stock was up almost 12 sessions in a row, couple red bars in here, but for the most part it was straight up. So if it goes below that 88.56 low from the 15th, I don't see that much until you get to the low of the second of 87.87. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Deere. Again, remember I was saying early off the show, as option expiration, sometimes stocks can tend to open a bit higher, all depending on what the positions are. So we'll have to see if they can try to open this up, but I'd just be careful if I'm buying this off the hop, because this could, Goldman Sachs is very influential.
Absolutely.
We got the limited LTD also getting downgraded here this morning at Jefferies. That stock is trading down here in the pre-market. Actually, no trades, but it is offered down. Do you have what the Jefferies limited downgrade was going on there?
They downgraded it to underperform there and lowered their price target from $46 down to $40 there. I don't see specifics on this one, but that's a decent drop in its price target there.
You've
So
got the
I think we get a
stock.
little action there.
You've got the stock trading down here or offered down here 40 cents in the pre-market. You can see the best offers of 50.09. The best bids down at 49.05. So obviously LTD is going to open down here, it looks like, because nobody's even sniffing this guy offered at 50.09. Looks like it could open in the 49 handle, but I look at this bar here, I'm going to point it out. Basically you had a trading range on the 25th of April, a low of 48.83 and a high of 50.84. What that's telling me is that there's just not a lot in the 49 handle. So I think this could see the lower 49s and possibly take out 49. The low of that day was 48.83, so that's where I'd be looking at as a next potential support level. If this thing starts to open below 50, it could get a little bit ugly. Also yesterday reporting Dell here. Obviously Dell's with the takeover stuff isn't going to be as much, but how was the Dell quarter here?
On the bottom line, things were looking pretty rough. EPS came in at 21 cents versus the street estimates, which are at 35 cents. Revenues did beat on the top line, though, which is kind of been uncommon for this earnings season. Revenues coming in at $14.1 billion versus the street estimates of $13.52 billion. Heard some comments that some analysts are thinking, why wouldn't Michael Dell just, run this thing into the ground to try and get Icahn and company away from it. So interesting to see Dell, continuing to perform poorly even into these going private talks.
Yeah, and obviously the stock doesn't move much because of the going private and the transactions that are pending there for Dell. But it does, when you see a weak quarter out of them, you got to think about a stock like Hewlett Packard. How are they doing? I know off the report initially last night, Hewlett Packard was selling off into the low 21s. It's trading just about flat right now here, Hewlett Packard 21.34. So it doesn't really look like Dell's having too much of an impact on the Hewlett Packard price here. If you are trading Hewlett today, though, I'm going to give you a couple levels. This 2171 area, 2168 was the high on the 9th, 2171 was the high on the 14th. Major resistance probably up in that area if the stock starts going to rally mode. And if it continues to sell off, I'd look at yesterday's low of 2091, where you may find a few more buyers. Apple yesterday had a reversal day. Obviously, it's been out of favor. We've been talking about Apple, but finally turns around. It's just funny, when the market's a little bit weak, that's when Apple turns around and gets strong. It's like this counter market stock, and it seems to move opposite to Google too, because Google had a little bit of a rough day yesterday, trading down for the first time in quite some time after making a new all-time high. Google reversed course, and Apple then, after making a new low on the move, reversed course too in a good way. And Apple is actually trading up here again this morning. Any comments there on Apple, Jake?
I mean, Apple's just a crazy stock, completely trading on sentiment there. I know people will keep talking about the fundamentals there and how its PE is hovering around the 9 range, but I mean, you're talking about a company here that just completely trades on sentiment.
Yep.
It's a tough one to predict, because no matter how much cash that company has on its balance sheet, it's still going to trade wherever the market's putting it and probably completely ignore the company itself.
It really is. This whole market is just trading on sentiment. We've been saying that on the show. I mean, you can talk fundamentals in different ways, but really this market is a momentum market, and when stocks are out of favor, they stay out of favor for quite some time. When stocks are in favor, we've seen it with the Netflix, we've seen it with the Tesla, you've seen it when they're in favor, they can stay in favor and move up for quite some time too. It's hard to buck those trends, but it's all about identifying when the trend has turned too. I think it was key. The one thing I did like about the Apple bounce, it bounced where it probably should have. You had major support if we go back into this whole 418 to 420 area. Back on the 4th, it made a low of 4th of March. The 5th, it made a low of 420.76. On the 7th of March, it made a low of 421. Came back down on the, I'm just trying to grab the dates here. On the April the 5th, it made a low of 419.58. On April the 15th, it made a low of 419.55. The next day, it made a low of 420.57, and then eventually fell through and obviously cut through the 420 handle and went straight down. So you had major support here at this 420 area, where I had 4 or 5 lows from March to April. Eventually took it out, blew through it, and went back up. So it kind of makes sense that when it comes back to test that area for the first time, that old floor became the floor once again, and it bounced right off of that level. That is good for the bulls. 418.90 was the low yesterday, so it bounced right off of that old support level. If you were eyeing that level up, good for you. If you picked the stock up there, because that was the old support and it became support once again. Bounced off it, is trading up another $4 here this morning at 438.98. So Apple looking, like the bulls might actually have a case here for this thing to go back up to that 450 area where it was having some support before, and that probably could give you some resistance here again. But that's 11 points away. I don't know if it's going to get there today. Let's go to Google too. Google had a big reversal day there yesterday, Jake. What did you think of that?
Seeing it had a ton of momentum there once it broke that $900 level, and I know there were some people that were saying that it had no more resistance and it was just going to run straight up to the $1,000 mark. But I think some traders got a little panicked once it broke that $900 level and really kind of wanted to pull it back a little bit. So that's it's been on an incredible run. It has to take a breath sometimes.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly what happened here. This stock has basically went in 10 trading sessions or 12 trading sessions from 800 to 920 yesterday. So you are eventually going to get some profit taking. I think that's what happened there too. And obviously that money was moving out of stocks, and they're like, well, what's cheap? Well, Apple's cheap, so maybe it was moving into stocks like Apple. It's funny, these stocks a year ago used to track each other very closely, Apple and Google. In the last 6 months, they're now almost opposite stocks. It's like when Apple's up $5, Google's down $5. It's just like, and that's what the case was yesterday. And it's obviously been more of Google being up 10 or $20 and Apple being down 10 or $20 in the last 3 or 4 months here. So these stocks just continue to move opposite of each other. We are seeing a we're not seeing that this morning because Google is trading up this morning at $4.64 at 908.41. But it'll be interesting to see if that trend does hold true once the market starts opening here. We're running short on time here, Jake. I just want to say again, it's option expiration here today, so we will see a little bit of extra volatility here, probably off the hop. Sometimes, liquidity can be thin there in the first opening minutes, like I was saying yesterday. Liquidity was very, very low yesterday in the first 3 or 4 minutes. I'd expect a little bit more of the same. I'd expect some pretty wild opens, some pretty wild moves in that first 5 or 10 minutes of trading. So if you don't like wild moves, you may want to just sit that out. If you do like wild moves, you might want to get in there because I'd imagine the first 5 or 10 minutes today will probably be pretty wild on the equities. Any other closing comments here on the overall market, Jake, as we move back up here 5 points?
Well, we do have, I think really Japan is driving the macro markets here. They had their first quarter GDP announced, and it was up 3.5%. That was yesterday morning. This morning they announced their machine orders figure, and analysts were expecting a 3.2% increase in it, and they actually rose 14.2%. So they just absolutely knocked that out of the park. I think that's going to give markets a lot of strength. I think, the traders are really watching, especially the macro traders, are really watching the Bank of Japan, what they're doing, and what the Japanese markets are doing, and how they're reacting. So I think a lot of that news is going in. And also, shout out to you guys up there in Canada. The Canadian CPI just did come out. Brent letting me know, so wanted to give you a shout out there.
Yeah, and this market tends to find all the good news that it can and try to drive up on it because it trades off sentiment, and the sentiment still is pretty strong for this overall market. It seems like every time we get a little bit of a pullback, we find buyers, and looks like we're finding those buyers here again this morning. Jake, thanks for stepping in here today. We'll have Joel be back on the show on Monday, and we will talk to you all. You guys have a great trading day, and we'll be back with you on Monday.